Good morning, this is your today's headlines briefing from the New York Times for Saturday, August 1st, 2026. I'm your host, and we have a packed edition today, from a dramatic border surge in North Africa to a sweeping deregulation of America's preschool program for poor children, from extreme heat reshaping European summers to a hedge fund meltdown led by a 24-year-old, and much more. Let's begin. Our top story takes us to Ceuta, a Spanish exclave on the North African coast, where on Thursday tens of thousands of Moroccans broke across the border in a stunning surge. By Friday evening, most had left, hungry and disappointed. Jason Horowitz was reporting from Ceuta and describes the scene. Like so many others in Morocco, Mohamed Amado saw on his social media feeds early Thursday that the heavily guarded border his country shared with the Spanish territory of Ceuta was open. Soon enough, he joined a crowd in the tens of thousands, many of whom were astonished to see Moroccan police urge them, as he recalled, to come to Spain. Some climbed over the fence, as he did, or dove through holes in the chain link, or swam across the maritime border. Some wore wetsuits, sometimes kicking with flippers, or floated on makeshift rafts. The scale was extraordinary, an estimated 50,000 people in a single day, and it exposed the fragility of Europe's southern frontier. Spanish authorities were overwhelmed. The Guardia Civil and National Police struggled to process the sheer volume, and by nightfall makeshift holding areas were packed. But the surge appeared to be as much a political signal as a migration wave. Morocco has long used its control over migration flows as leverage in disputes with Spain and the European Union, particularly over the contested status of Western Sahara. The fact that Moroccan police did not stop the crowds, and in some accounts actively encouraged them, suggests a calculated pressure campaign. By Friday, Spanish and Moroccan authorities had coordinated a mass return. Buses lined up to take migrants back across the border. Many left willingly, exhausted and without food or water. Others resisted. The episode left Ceuta's residents shaken and raised urgent questions about the durability of the EU's external border agreements. It also underscored how migration has become a geopolitical weapon, with human lives as the pawns. From one border crisis to a domestic policy battle, the Trump administration is preparing a major rollback of federal requirements for Head Start, the flagship preschool program for poor children. The White House tried but failed to block funding for the program outright. Instead, it will seek to strip away standards on health, literacy, and even brushing teeth. Coral Davenport reports that the proposed changes would remove most of Head Start's 133 pages of requirements for math and literacy curriculums, class sizes, medical screenings, home visits, and that requirement that children brush their teeth after meals. This comes from three people with knowledge of the plan who spoke on condition of anonymity to describe internal deliberations. The administration argues that the current regulations are burdensome and prevent providers from innovating. But supporters of the program, including many early childhood education experts, fear the changes could gut its long-standing anti-poverty mission. Head Start has long been distinguished from ordinary daycare by its comprehensive standards, not just education but health, nutrition, and family engagement. The toothbrushing requirement, for instance, isn't just about dental hygiene, it's a daily ritual that teaches self-care and routine. Removing medical screenings could mean vision and hearing problems go undetected. Eliminating home visits severs a critical link between teachers and families. The administration's strategy appears to be death by 1,000 cuts, keep the funding but hollow out the standards, leaving a program that exists in name only. Congressional Democrats are already gearing up for a fight, and the debate promises to be a defining one for the future of early childhood policy in America. Staying in Washington, Democrats are demanding that Mitch McConnell resign his Senate seat. The 84-year-old Kentucky Republican has been absent for an extended period due to poor health. But as Carl Hulse reports from the Capitol, a charged political environment and a social media storm have intensified demands for more transparency regarding his condition, and for McConnell, whose term ends in January, to step aside if he cannot participate for the remainder of his tenure. Kentucky's Democratic governor, Andy Beshear, put it bluntly, "As governor of the state you serve, I am calling on you to directly and verbally address the people of Kentucky and provide proof of your capacity to serve, or resign." This is a striking moment. The Senate has a long history of members serving through serious illness: Strom Thurmond, Robert Byrd, Thad Cochran, Dianne Feinstein, often with little public pressure to resign. But times are changing. The combination of a razor-thin partisan balance, the visibility of McConnell's freezing episodes on camera, and a media environment that demands immediacy has created a new standard. Republicans counter that McConnell's staff says he's working behind the scenes, and that voters elected him to a 6-year term knowing his age. But the pressure is mounting, and it reflects a broader reckoning with gerontocracy in American politics. Now to Europe, where summer itself is being rewritten. Jim Tankersley and Tatiana Fursova report from Berlin on how rising temperatures and more frequent heat waves have changed the feel of the season for today's children compared with their parents and grandparents. Christiane Bielensky took her father and her young children on a sparkling Friday morning in June to the shores of Krummlank Lake, in a leafy and wealthy nook of western Berlin. It was a nice morning for water splashing and card playing and building sand castles on the beach, the kind that Ms. Bielensky enjoyed during her own childhood in Bavaria. With one sweltering exception. It wasn't that hot when she was young, Ms. Bielensky, 38, said. Definitely not that hot. Temperatures in Berlin and across Germany soared above 100 degrees Fahrenheit this summer, shattering records. The data is unequivocal: Europe is warming faster than the global average. The number of days above 30 Celsius 86 Fahrenheit has doubled or tripled in many cities since the 1950s. Nights don't cool down the way they used to, depriving bodies of recovery time. For children, this means summer camps cancelled, playgrounds too hot to touch, school years starting earlier to avoid August heat. For the elderly, it's a mortal threat. The 2003 European heat wave killed an estimated 70,000 people. Infrastructure isn't built for this: few homes have air conditioning, train rails buckle, power grids strain. The cultural rhythm of the European summer, the long lunches, the outdoor cafes, the August exodus to the coast, is fracturing. As one climate scientist put it, we're not just seeing hotter summers. We're seeing a different season entirely. That heat is also fueling disaster. In France, officials failed to enforce wildfire rules in the area hit by the country's worst fire in decades. Catherine Porter, Ségolène Lestratic, and Samuel Granados report that under French rules, homeowners must clear vegetation within roughly 50 yards of their houses. In the forests affected by the blaze, that didn't happen. After fires tore through forests outside Bordeaux in 2022, President Emmanuel Macron called on rural villages to finally implement long-ignored forestry rules meant to prevent such a vast blaze in the future. Among other requirements, residents in that region were instructed to clear all bushes and prune low-hanging tree branches within 50 meters, roughly 55 yards, of their homes. But the reporters spoke with mayors, foresters, experts, and firefighters in the areas affected by the fire, and analyzed satellite imagery of 23 villages. They found widespread non-compliance. Many property owners simply didn't do the work. Some didn't know the rules. Others couldn't afford it. And enforcement was virtually non-existent. Local mayors, who are responsible for issuing fines, rarely did so, reluctant to penalize their constituents. The result: when the fire came, it had a continuous ladder of fuel from ground to canopy, allowing it to explode across the landscape. The blaze consumed over 50,000 acres, destroyed hundreds of homes, and forced thousands to evacuate. It's a grim illustration of how climate adaptation requires not just rules, but the political will to enforce them and the resources to help people comply. From fire to the front lines of a different kind of warfare. In Ukraine, political turmoil will not derail the country's killer robot program, says the ousted defense minister. Andrew Kramer reports from Kiev that Mikhailo Fedorov, the former defense minister and an advocate for drone and robot warfare, says the country's tech-heavy strategy will persist. If there is one group of people happy to have artificial intelligence take their jobs, it is Ukrainian soldiers. Two of them, on a break in a Kiev coffee shop, asked to have their picture taken with the man trying to take them off the front, the recently fired defense minister, Mikhailo Fedorov. The soldiers smiled and gave a thumbs up for the camera, as though Fedorov were not at the center of a government schism that rocked Ukraine last month, exposing fractures in its highest circles even as the war tilted in the country's favor. In an interview, Fedorov said the shift toward unmanned systems, drones, robotic ground vehicles, AI-guided targeting, was irreversible, no matter who sits in the defense ministry. Ukraine has become a laboratory for algorithmic warfare, with startups and military units iterating in real time. The goal: reduce human casualties by letting machines do the dying. But the program faces challenges: electronic warfare, supply chains, ethical questions about autonomous targeting. Fedorov's ouster was officially about corruption allegations, but many analysts see it as a power struggle over the direction of the war effort. His insistence that the tech strategy will outlast him suggests a deeper institutionalization of this approach. Ukraine's military is betting its future on code and circuitry. Turning to the United States, a haunting mystery in Arizona. The 84-year-old mother of Savannah Guthrie, the television news anchor, has been missing for nearly 6 months. Nicholas Bogle-Burrows reports that a ransom note addressed to Savannah Guthrie a day after her 84-year-old mother, Nancy Guthrie, was kidnapped said that the elder Ms. Guthrie was safe but scared, but another note sent several days later said that she had died unexpectedly of a medical condition. The notes, released on Friday by the Pima County Sheriff's Department in Arizona, suggested that whoever was responsible for her abduction may not have intended to kill her. And their release, nearly 6 months after Ms. Guthrie's disappearance, was also a sign of how little apparent progress the investigation has made. The Sheriff's Department said it was releasing the notes now in hopes of generating new leads. Nancy Guthrie was abducted from her home in Tucson in February. The case has baffled investigators: no suspects, no clear motive, no body. The ransom notes themselves are strange, the first demanding money, the second claiming natural death. The family has been living in limbo. Savannah Guthrie has not spoken publicly about the case in recent months. The release of the notes is a rare glimpse into an investigation that has gone cold, and a reminder that behind every missing person statistic is a family waiting for answers. In Los Angeles, an officer has been charged with violating his colleagues' privacy after he secretly recorded them making racist, homophobic, and sexist comments. Jill Cowan and Sean Hubler report that Daniel Flores faces 16 felony counts of eavesdropping on or recording confidential communications. If convicted, he could spend up to 13 years in prison. The charges stem from recordings that Flores made over the course of 2024, when he was working in a Los Angeles police unit that recruited new officers. Let me be clear about why this case is important. California is one of only a handful of states that requires consent from everyone involved who might be recorded, said the district attorney. The recordings allegedly captured training officers using slurs, mocking recruits' backgrounds, and making derogatory remarks about women and LGBTQ people. Flores, who is Latino, said he made the recordings because he was disturbed by the culture and wanted evidence. But California's two-party consent law makes it a crime to record confidential communications without all parties' permission. The case has sparked a fierce debate: is Flores a whistleblower exposing toxic culture, or a criminal who violated the law? The LAPD has faced repeated scandals over racism and misconduct. This prosecution of the person who brought the misconduct to light has raised eyebrows across the country. Civil liberties groups are watching closely. The tension between accountability and privacy law is at the heart of this case. And the Coast Guard is confronting a hidden injury crisis. Dave Phillips reports that the head of the U.S. Coast Guard told all personnel on Thursday that slamming through rough seas was causing brain injuries to small boat crews and vowed to take what he called decisive action to prevent, recognize, and treat the injuries, which have often gone undiagnosed. Our crews operate in a dangerous and unforgiving maritime environment. The demands of our missions are immense, Admiral Kevin Lunde, the commandant of the Coast Guard, wrote in an email sent to the whole force. We owe it to you to protect your long-term health from the damage caused by relentless wave pounding. The email was sent just hours after the New York Times published an investigation revealing that the Coast Guard had known for years that repeated exposure to high-G impacts on fast boats and rough water was causing traumatic brain injuries similar to those seen in football players and blast-exposed soldiers. The service had done little to track, treat, or prevent them. Crews described headaches, memory loss, balance problems, and mood changes, symptoms they were told to push through. Now, the commandant has ordered immediate changes: new helmets with better padding, sensors to measure impact forces, mandatory neurological screening, and a cultural shift to treat these injuries as seriously as any combat wound. It's a remarkable acknowledgement from a service that prides itself on toughness and a model for other branches grappling with the same issue. In politics, federal prosecutors have dropped charges against a former Olympian accused of vandalizing the Lincoln Memorial reflecting pool, acknowledging that the Trump administration's claims of vandalism were false. Madeleine Rubin and David A. Farenthold report that prosecutors said contractors hired by the Trump administration had botched the renovation of the Lincoln Memorial reflecting pool, leaving behind widespread damage in the pool's new blue lining, and that the Interior Department had then falsely blamed the damage on vandals. In an extraordinary motion filed Friday evening, the U.S. Attorney in Washington, Jeanine Pirro, said she was seeking to dismiss a felony charge against David Hearn, a former Olympic canoeist who was accused of pulling up a piece of the pool's lining 2 feet square. In doing so, prosecutors effectively admitted that the government's own contractors caused the damage and that the administration tried to pin it on a citizen. Hearn had been arrested in a high-profile case touted by the Justice Department as part of a crackdown on vandalism of federal monuments. The dismissal is a stunning reversal and raises questions about whether other similar cases were also fabricated. It also underscores the danger of politicizing law enforcement. On the international front, President Trump has backtracked on a promise to let Ukraine make Patriot missiles, weapons sorely needed as a defense against Russia's deadly ballistic missile attacks. Chris Cameron reports from Washington that on July 8, Mr. Trump had unexpectedly assented to sharing technology behind the missiles to allow Ukraine to build them, saying that will give them the right to make Patriots during a meeting with President Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine on the sidelines of the NATO summit meeting in Ankara, Turkey. He added, "We'll show them how to do it." But on Friday, the administration reversed course. The reason appears to be pressure from Lockheed Martin and Raytheon, the U.S. defense contractors who build the Patriots and profit from foreign sales. They lobbied hard against technology transfer, arguing it would undermine their business and U.S. control over sensitive missile technology. Ukraine had warned it was running out of Patriot interceptors, the most reliable weapon it has to shoot down Russian ballistic missiles. The reversal leaves Ukraine dependent on U.S. supply lines, which have been erratic. It also fits a pattern. Trump makes bold promises in meetings with foreign leaders, then walks them back under domestic pressure. For Ukraine, it's a potentially deadly disappointment. And Trump and Netanyahu may be at odds again over a Gaza plan. Michael Crowley reports that President Trump brushed off questions on Friday about the viability of a new plan to disarm Hamas, insisting that Israel was very happy with the deal despite signs of concern from Israel's government. "We do have an understanding with Israel," Mr. Trump told reporters after a cabinet meeting at the Camp David presidential retreat. "Israel is very happy about it. Israel helped us." But a day after proclaiming the plan a historic breakthrough, Mr. Trump tempered expectations. Calling the situation very complex, he warned that the process would probably undergo ups and downs. The plan was officially announced amid a difficult point in the relationship between the two leaders over their war against Iran. Netanyahu has been pushing for a more aggressive stance against Iranian nuclear facilities. Trump has favored a diplomatic track. The Gaza plan, details of which remain vague, appears to involve a phased disarmament of Hamas in exchange for reconstruction aid and security guarantees. But Israeli officials have privately expressed skepticism that Hamas can be disarmed without a prolonged military occupation, which Netanyahu wants to avoid. The tension between the two men, both strong-willed and media-savvy, has become a defining feature of Middle East diplomacy. Whether this plan survives their differences remains to be seen. Now to business, where a Wunderkinds AI hedge fund melted down spectacularly. Leopold Aschenbrenner built a hot AI hedge fund called Situational Awareness. Then it melted down. The fund, led by the 24-year-old, exploded onto the artificial intelligence scene and then nosedived. Aschenbrenner, a former OpenAI researcher, had raised hundreds of millions betting on his ability to predict AI breakthroughs. His thesis, that artificial general intelligence was imminent, and that the companies building it would capture unprecedented value. He positioned the fund accordingly, long on compute, long on specific labs, short on skeptics. But the market turned. AI hype cooled. Valuations compressed. The fund's concentrated bets became liabilities. Investors fled. The meltdown is a cautionary tale about the intersection of AI evangelism and financial leverage. It also raises questions about the due diligence of the sophisticated investors who backed a 24-year-old with a concentrated, high-conviction strategy in the most volatile sector on Earth. The fund's collapse wiped out hundreds of millions in weeks. Aschenbrenner has gone quiet. The episode will likely chill AI-focused hedge fund launches for a while, a reminder that even in a gold rush, not everyone who sells pickaxes strikes gold. At the Federal Reserve, Kevin M. Warsh is considering reducing the number of regularly scheduled meetings at which the central bank sets interest rates, a potentially seismic move that would mark the most significant change in how the Fed operates in years. Colby Smith and Ben Castleman report that the Federal Reserve's 12-person policy committee meets 8 times a year and votes on whether to lift, lower, or hold borrowing costs. Mr. Warsh raised the idea of changing the frequency of those meetings at the Fed's gathering in Jackson Hole last year, and the discussion has continued internally. The argument for fewer meetings: the economy doesn't move in 6-week cycles, and the current cadence creates unnecessary market volatility and a performative aspect to policymaking. The argument against regular meetings: provide a disciplined framework, ensure accountability, and allow the Fed to respond to shocks. Warsh, a former Fed governor who returned as chairman, has a reputation for challenging orthodoxy. Reducing meetings would be the biggest change since he became chairman. It would also signal a shift toward a more rules-based, less discretionary approach, something Warsh has long advocated. Markets are watching closely. Any change would need congressional approval, and the political optics of a less active Fed could be tricky. But the debate itself reflects a broader rethinking of central banking in an era of abundant data and algorithmic trading. And at the Washington Post, the editor of the opinion section has resigned after just 1 year. Adam O'Neill inherited a mandate from the paper's owner, Jeff Bezos, to shift toward personal liberties in free markets. Eric Wemple reports that O'Neill resigned on Friday, a little more than a year after Bezos hired him to reorient the section toward a more libertarian bent. While this was not an easy decision, I am leaving proud of how far the opinion section has come and optimistic that its best days lie ahead, Mr. O'Neill wrote in a note to colleagues. He did not say in the note why he was leaving. In a meeting with colleagues on Friday, Mr. O'Neill explained that his departure was a personal decision that he had been considering for a while, according to 2 people who attended. When pressed, he acknowledged tensions with the newsroom over the direction of the section. The Post's opinion pages have been a flashpoint since Bezos bought the paper in 2013. The previous editor, David Shipley, left amid controversy over a column that critics said downplayed the January 6 attack. O'Neill was brought in to chart a clearer ideological course. But the newsroom's union and many reporters resisted what they saw as an owner-driven ideological purge. The resignation suggests the tension between editorial independence and owner influence remains unresolved. Bezos will now search for a third opinion editor in a short span, a signal that the experiment in libertarian repositioning may be faltering. In New York, a horrific case of child neglect in the Bronx. Sarah Maslin Neer and Miles G. Cohen report that a mother and grandmother face charges over the care of twin teenagers with autism. One of the boys weighed 59 pounds when he died. His brother, according to prosecutors, barely survived. For years, the twin boys who lived in apartment number 6 in the sandy-colored building in the Bronx played in the hallways and laughed out front, always under the watchful eye of their mother and grandmother. Sometimes they struggled. Nonverbal and autistic, the brothers, 16, still wore diapers and occasionally had meltdowns. But their 2 caregivers always appeared patient and doting, bringing home pizzas or waiting for a tantrum to pass with kind words of encouragement. So it was a shock when a neighbor, Christine Valentine, looked out her window one day in May and saw one of the boys being carried out limp, skeletal, unrecognizable as the child she'd watched grow up. The other boy was found alive but severely malnourished, hospitalized in critical condition. Prosecutors alleged the women withheld food and medical care for months. The dead boy, 16, weighed 59 pounds, less than half the typical weight for his age. The survival of his twin is being called a miracle. The case has shaken the neighborhood and raised questions about how such profound neglect could go unnoticed by schools, social services, and a community that thought it knew the family. The charges include murder, manslaughter, and endangering the welfare of a child. The women have pleaded not guilty. The tragedy underscores the invisibility of disability in overwhelmed systems. Also in the region, 2 children drowned in New Jersey's Passaic River. Neil Vigdor and Mac Lederman report that the body of a girl, 10, was found in the Passaic River on Friday evening, 2 days after she was swept away. The body of a boy the same age was recovered earlier. The surface of the water appeared deceptively calm, drawing 3 children, none of them older than 11, closer to the edge of the rain-swollen Passaic River in New Jersey. The children were standing on a concrete boat launch ramp on the riverbank in Passaic, New Jersey, about a dozen miles west of Manhattan, on Wednesday night when they appeared to lose their footing, the city's mayor, Hector C. Laura, said. 2 of them were swept away in what Mr. Laura described as a strong undercurrent, prompting an intense search. The body of one of the children, a boy, was recovered Thursday. The girl's body was found Friday. A third child, an 11-year-old girl, was rescued by a bystander who jumped in. The boy who died was credited with trying to save his sister. The tragedy has devastated the tight-knit community and prompted calls for better barriers and warning signs along the riverbank. The Passaic, long polluted and neglected, has seen a revival in recent years, but its dangers remain, especially after heavy rain. And New York is suing Kalshire in the latest bid to regulate prediction markets. Hirabi Nico and Santal Nurker report that the New York Attorney General on Friday sued Kalshire, a titan in the prediction market industry, accusing the company of operating illegally and in defiance of laws aimed at curbing unregulated gambling. The suit says the New York-based company has tried to avoid the state's strict regulations on gambling by allowing users to place wagers that amount to betting under the guise of event contracts on a prediction market. By ignoring our laws, Kalshur is running an illegal operation and harming New Yorkers in the process, Letitia James, the New York Attorney General, said in a statement. At least 15 states have introduced legislation this year to regulate the markets. Prediction markets, where people bet on the outcome of elections, economic indicators, geopolitical events, have exploded in popularity, fueled by crypto-native platforms and a growing appetite for information markets. Proponents say they aggregate wisdom and produce accurate forecasts. Critics say they're just gambling with a veneer of intellectualism, prone to manipulation and addiction. The Kalshur suit is the most aggressive state action yet. It could set a precedent for how these platforms are treated nationwide. The company says it operates legally under federal commodities law. The courts will decide. In arts, can a gritty Spider-Man save the superhero movie? Emmanuel Morgan reports from Los Angeles that the newest entry in the franchise took a more grounded approach, a departure for a spectacle-focused genre that is teetering at the box office. In an early meeting to discuss the future of Spider-Man, the director Destin Daniel Cretton and Tom Rothman, the chief executive of Sony Pictures Entertainment's film division, debated the meaning of the word grounded. It seems straightforward, but Cretton needed to know before accepting the job. If the intention was to go bigger, I definitely would not have done this movie, Cretton said. The most recent live-action Spider-Man movie at that time had sent Peter Parker through the multiverse, where he had met versions of himself from alternate realities. In two broad strokes, the genre had become maximalist, more characters, more universes, more CGI, more runtime. Spider-Man, Brand New Day aims to reverse that. It's set in a recognizable New York, focuses on Peter's financial struggles, his rent, his job, his relationships. The villain is a street-level criminal, not a universe-ending threat. The action is practical, stunt work, wire rigs, minimal green screen. Early test screenings have been strong. But the question remains, after years of escalation, can audiences embrace a smaller Spider-Man? The box office will answer. The genre's fatigue is real. Recent Marvel and DC releases have underperformed. A hit here could signal a course correction. A flop could mean the superhero era is truly ending. Speaking of performances, on Ted Lasso, Hannah Waddingham is ruthless. Off camera, she's quite a goofy nugget. The British actor has beaten a path from musical theatre to the screen that few have managed. Waddingham's Rebecca Welton, the icy, vengeful, ultimately redemptive owner of AFC Richmond, earned her an Emmy and a global following. But the woman behind the role is, by all accounts, her opposite, warm, self-deprecating, prone to bursting into show tunes at rap parties. Colleagues describe her as a theatre kid who never grew up in the best way. She credits her West End training for the discipline to sustain a character across seasons. "You learn to find the truth in 8 shows a week," she said. The camera just catches it closer. Her journey, from Spamalot to Game of Thrones to Ted Lasso, reflects a broader opening of British theatre talent to global streaming. She's now developing her own projects, determined to bring the same rigor to producing. "I want to make things that feel like a hug and a punch at the same time," she said. That duality, ruthless on screen, goofy off it, might be her greatest strength. For your streaming queue, 5 science fiction movies to watch now. Elizabeth Vincentelli surveys the landscape, from the Ryan Gosling hit Project Hail Mary to the psychosexual alien rom-com Touch Me. Working on this column involves watching a lot of despair-inducing stories about intractable challenges, from environmental wreckage to technology run amok. But problems always have solutions, in the 2 movies based on Andy Weir novels, The Martian and now Project Hail Mary. Like its predecessor, Phil Lord and Christopher Miller's film may be set in outer space, but it relies on quaint values like tinkering, perseverance, and problem-solving ingenuity, and emphasizes the importance of cooperation. In Project Hail Mary, Ryland Grace, Ryan Gosling, is the only survivor of a desperate mission to save Earth from a star-eating microbe. He wakes up with amnesia, pieces together his purpose, and forms an unlikely partnership with an alien being. It's The Martian with a buddy comedy twist and a surprising amount of heart. Other picks include Touch Me, a genuinely weird alien romance that's more about intimacy than invasion, The Creator, Gareth Edwards' visual stunner about AI and humanity, 65, Adam Driver fighting dinosaurs with lasers, sillier than it sounds, and Prey, the Predator prequel that stripped the franchise to its essence. An eclectic month for a genre that refuses to die. In books, Emily Wilson's takedown of The Odyssey has ignited a debate. Wilson, whose 2017 translation of Homer's Greek classic influenced the director Christopher Nolan, panned his screenplay for the movie version in an essay for the London Review of Books. Wilson's translation was celebrated for its clarity, its contemporary voice, its refusal to soften the poem's brutality. Nolan, a fan, invited her to consult on his adaptation. She read the screenplay. She did not like it. In her essay, she argues that Nolan's version flattens the poem's moral complexity, turns Odysseus into a straightforward hero, and sanitizes the violence and sexual politics that make the original unsettling. The Odyssey is not a hero's journey, she writes. It's a story about the cost of return. The debate has split classicists and filmmakers. Some defend Nolan's right to adapt. Others say Wilson's critique exposes a fundamental misunderstanding of the source material. Nolan has not responded publicly. But the clash between the most acclaimed living translator of Homer and the most ambitious filmmaker of his generation is a rare public collision of literary and cinematic authority. It reminds us that adaptation is always interpretation, and that the ancient texts still have the power to provoke. Also in books, Douglas Stewart's latest novel, John of John, follows a profoundly isolated father and son, each grappling with long-held secrets. The Book Reviews Podcast Club discussed it in a 58-minute episode. Early in the novel, Stewart describes a peculiar irony. What skinned him was that the closer he got to home, the more lost he felt. It's a passing line, but it captures the tension at the heart of this magnificent book, a story of two men, each profoundly isolated, trying to figure out how to exist in a small, claustrophobic world. The traveler heading home and dreading it is Cal, a young gay man who has recently graduated from college in Edinburgh and has been floundering ever since. He is summoned back to the small village where he grew up to care for his sick grandmother. He obliges, but he's not happy about the move. A rakish dreamer, Cal doesn't fit into the prescribed rhythms of village life. His father, John, is a different kind of lost, a widower who has retreated into silence and routine, guarding a secret about Cal's mother. The novel alternates between their perspectives, building toward a confrontation that is as much about language as love. Stewart, a Booker winner for Shuggie Bain, writes with a poet's precision and a social worker's empathy. The book club will discuss it in depth, a conversation worth listening to. And for August, the Book Review Book Club will read and discuss Patrick Radden Keefe's London Falling, a dazzling investigation into the death of a British teenager. M.J. Franklin, the club's host, introduces the pick. For the Bretlers, it was a loss that was as tragic as it was confounding. In 2019, the family's 19-year-old son Zach disappeared. Days later, his body was found in the Thames. Surveillance footage showed him entering the water, but the circumstances remained mysterious. Keefe, the author of Say Nothing and Empire of Pain, spent years reconstructing Zach's final days, his mental health struggles, his university pressures, the gaps in the system that failed him. The result is a work of investigative journalism that reads like a novel, and a meditation on grief, institutional blindness, and the stories we tell to make sense of senseless loss. The club discussion promises to be powerful. On to food. The perfect BLT doesn't need to be perfect. It's the sandwich of the summer every summer, but our writer discovers this American classic is also a pleasure for all seasons. The secret, it turns out, isn't what you think. It's not the tomato, though a sun-warmed heirloom helps. It's not the bacon, though thick-cut, applewood smoked, crisped to the edge of burnt is ideal. It's not even the lettuce, though iceberg's crunch is non-negotiable. It's the mayo. Specifically, the ratio. And the bread-to-filling architecture. And the temperature differential, hot bacon, cold tomato, cool lettuce, room temp mayo, toasted but not burnt bread. The writer tests variations, adds avocado, tries sourdough, swaps Kewpie for Hellmann's, and keeps returning to the canonical version. The BLT is a study in constraints. 3 main ingredients, plus bread and mayo. Each must be perfect. The window is narrow. But when it aligns, it's transcendence. And the beauty is, you can make it in January with greenhouse tomatoes and still taste summer. That's the magic. And for a crowd, cold, no-sweat summer drinks. It's hot, it's muggy, and the last thing anybody wants is a hassle. These easy-to-prepare drinks are cooling and delicious. The list includes a big batch Paloma with fresh grapefruit and a salt rim, a cucumber mint agua fresca that stays vibrant for hours, a hibiscus iced tea with lime and a hint of agave, a sparkling Negroni Sbagliato pre-mixed in a pitcher, and a frozen margarita slush made in a zip-top bag, no blender required. The principles: make ahead, scale easily, minimize ice dilution, maximize refreshment. Each recipe serves 8 to 12. They're designed for the host who wants to drink with their guests, not tend bar for them. Summer entertaining should be this simple. In science, the U.S. raises the threat of steep water cuts in the lower Colorado River Basin. Scott Dance reports from Washington that a federal plan would impose drastic water cuts on Arizona, California, and Nevada in dry years over the next decade. A legal battle could follow. Communities and farms across the three states face potentially drastic cuts in the water they can use from the Colorado River over the next decade under a plan the Trump administration published on Friday. The proposal is meant to try to break a logjam among the 7 states that rely on the Colorado and comes as rising temperatures and decades of drought and water overuse have overwhelmed a river system that feeds major cities and important farmland. The proposal raises the potential for complex legal battles that could play out for years. The administration's move is significant because it bypasses the consensus-based process that has governed the river for a century. The upper basin states, Colorado, Utah, Wyoming, New Mexico, are not subject to the same cuts, a point of fierce contention. Arizona, which holds junior water rights, would bear the brunt. California, with senior rights, has historically been insulated but now faces pressure to share the pain. Nevada, with the smallest allocation, watches warily. The plan includes incentives for conservation, funding for infrastructure, and a framework for shortage sharing. But the core dispute, who gets how much when there isn't enough, remains unresolved. The Colorado River Compact of 1922 was based on flawed hydrology. Climate change has made the flaw fatal. This proposal is an attempt to impose a solution from above. The lawsuits are already being drafted. In wellness, a stab wound, then a real emergency. Lisa Sanders, MD, presents a diagnosis column. By the time the 36-year-old man got to the Tahoe Forest Hospital emergency room in Truckee, California, the t-shirt he was using as a bandage was soaked with blood. He had been applying as much pressure as he could to the deep cut on his left forearm, but the blood seeped through his makeshift dressing, and the limb throbbed. In the ER, the man was impatient as the interminable paperwork was completed and he was put in a curtained cubicle. It was barely 1 p.m., and the ER was empty. The doctor on duty, Jonathan Lane, approached the bed and introduced himself as he took in the young man and his soaking wrap. "What happened?" he asked. "I stabbed myself," the man explained. The wound was deep, clean, and deliberate, a horizontal slice across the volar forearm, the kind that severs tendons and arteries. But the man was calm, almost detached. He didn't want a psych consult. He didn't want to talk about why. He just wanted it stitched. Dr. Lane called the hand surgeon. The repair took 2 hours. The man tolerated it without complaint. But when the anesthesia wore off, the pain was excruciating, worse than the injury itself. The nerves, regenerating, fired chaotically. The man, who had been stoic through the trauma, broke down. The column explores the strange alchemy of pain, how the body's healing can hurt more than the wound, and how the mind's defenses can crumble when the chemistry changes. It's a reminder that the emergency isn't always the injury. Sometimes it's what comes after. In travel, the State Department plans to distribute 250,000 more Trump passports. Gabe Castro-Root reports that an additional 250,000 commemorative passports, featuring a portrait of President Trump and intended to honor the nation's 250th anniversary, will be available at in-person events. The commemorative passports, intended to honor the nation's 250th, were released earlier this month in Washington. An additional 250,000 of them will be made available, the department said. A department representative said Friday that the move came after 30,000 Americans phoned a passport call center since July 4 looking to apply for that specific passport. The documents, which the White House has referred to as the 250th anniversary passport, feature a portrait of President Trump on the inside cover, along with the dates 1776 to 2026. They are functionally identical to standard passports but have become collector's items and political lightning rods. Critics call them a taxpayer-funded vanity project. Supporters call them a patriotic keepsake. The State Department says they're available to any citizen who applies in person at a passport agency or center. The demand surprised officials. It speaks to the enduring intensity of the Trump brand and the way national symbols have become contested terrain. Also in travel, a writer goes in search of the architect Eliel Saarinen, whose Art Nouveau-inspired designs helped shape early 1900s Finland as well as mid-century America. Michael H. Hodges reports from Helsinki. Lucky are the cities exalted by their buildings. San Francisco has its Victorian row houses, and Paris has the Second Empire mansard roofs that frame nearly every vista. But some cities' architectural treasures aren't so obvious, and that's one reason the writer found himself exploring Helsinki last year. Tourism to Finland has boomed in recent years, with many visitors drawn by design, nature, and the sauna culture. But Saarinen's Helsinki, the Helsinki of the National Museum, the railway station, the Pohjola insurance headquarters with its foxes, bears, and grinning figures drawn from Finland's founding epic, the Kalevala, remains a quiet revelation. Saarinen left for America in 1923, where he designed the Cranbrook Academy in Michigan and became a father figure to mid-century modernism. His son Eero would design the Gateway Arch and the TWA terminal. But the Finnish work is where it started, a synthesis of national romanticism and modern rationality. Walking the streets of Helsinki, you see the roots of a design philosophy that would shape a continent. The writer's search becomes a meditation on how buildings hold memory, and how an architect's vision can outlive empires. In real estate, to save Japan's heritage homes, people are shipping them across the world. Tim Horniak reports that millions of abandoned kaminkas, traditional Japanese folk houses, are scattered across Japan. Now, teams of enthusiasts are dismantling and rebuilding them overseas. High in the foothills of the Wallowa Mountains stands a compact home of white walls, wood, and shingle. Set against a backdrop of snow-capped peaks in this corner of eastern Oregon, the house appears tiny and slightly out of place, especially when you step inside to find shoji screens, tatami mats, and thick, curving rafters overhead. It is a kaminka, but its existence in the United States is anything but traditional. The house was built in the 1890s in a village in Gifu Prefecture. It was slated for demolition when a Japanese-American nonprofit bought it, numbered every beam and joint, shipped it in containers, and reassembled it in Oregon. The movement is growing. Kaminka North America, a startup, has relocated dozens. Buyers include tea ceremony practitioners, architects, and people seeking a slower way of living. In Japan, depopulation and aging have left an estimated 8 million homes vacant. Many are kaminkas, timber-framed, joinery-rich, built to last centuries. Demolition is cheap, preservation is hard. Export offers a third path. But critics warn of cultural displacement. These houses were rooted in specific landscapes, climates, communities. Rebuilding them in Oregon or England or Hawaii changes their meaning. The debate is part of a larger conversation about heritage in a globalized world. Can Key West still be a home for writers? Dory Chevlin reports that Ernest Hemingway, Judy Blume, and other literary luminaries have long called the island home. As housing costs increase, many locals are taking steps to preserve and perpetuate this legacy. In 1935, the poet Wallace Stevens wrote to his friend Harriet Monroe, the editor of Poetry magazine, exasperated, Key West, unfortunately, is becoming rather literary and artistic. Ernest Hemingway arrived a few years later, and the die was cast. Tennessee Williams, Elizabeth Bishop, Robert Frost, Jimmy Buffett, Judy Blume. The list of writers who lived, wrote, or wintered in Key West is staggering for an island of 25,000 people. The Hemingway Home and Museum is the most well-known literary destination, but far from its only one. There's the Tennessee Williams House, the Elizabeth Bishop Cottage, the Blue Heaven restaurant where poets still read. But the median home price has topped $1.2 million. Short-term rentals have emptied neighborhoods. Writers who once rented cottages for $500 a month now face $5,000. A coalition of locals, librarians, booksellers, descendants of the literary legends is fighting back. They've created a community land trust to buy and preserve affordable housing for writers. They're pushing for zoning changes to limit vacation rentals. They're documenting oral histories before the generation that knew the writers passes. The question is whether a place can remain a literary haven when the economics of paradise push out the very people who made it one. The answer will define Key West's next chapter. And vote for your favorite $1 million home in Italy. Lana Bortolot presents a property in the Contrada Specchiaruzzo district of Ostuni, about 10 miles west of the historic hill town of the same name, known as the White City for its whitewashed stone houses. It comprises 6 trulli, the traditional conical-shaped houses that dot the Etria Valley landscape, particularly in Alberobello, 12 miles away, where the concentration of the stone huts makes the town a UNESCO World Heritage Site. This property has a consistent rental history for 5 months of the year, according to the listing agent, and is near 2 well-known picturesque towns, Martina Franca, 6 miles away, and Cisternino, 8 miles away. The southern Apulia region, forming the heel of Italy's boot, offers historic homes with architectural delicacies and wide open spaces. The contest invites readers to choose among a curated selection, a blend of travel fantasy and real estate porn. It's a reminder that in Italy, even the humblest traditional forms have become luxury assets. In fashion, the next Met fashion blockbuster and gala will honor the controversial designer John Galliano. Vanessa Friedman reports that as famous for his anti-Semitic rant in 2011 as he is for his fashion, Galliano would be one of only 3 living designers ever to receive the honor. The group of people gathered for a closed-door meeting at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in May was unusual by any measure. Anna Wintour, Vogue's global editorial director and a Met trustee, Andrew Bolton, the Costume Institute's curator, and a handful of senior staff. The decision was not unanimous. Galliano's 2011 arrest in Paris, caught on video making anti-Semitic slurs in a bar, led to his firing from Dior, criminal conviction in France, and years of exile. He has since apologized, undergone treatment, and staged a quiet comeback at Maison Margiela, where his work has been critically acclaimed. But the shadow remains. The Met's choice to honor him with an exhibition and a gala co-chair role signals a belief in redemption, or at least in the separation of art and artist. Critics say it minimizes hate speech. Supporters say it acknowledges a singular talent. The exhibition, scheduled for 2027, will be a test of whether the fashion world's most prestigious platform can hold complexity or whether it will simply celebrate. Also in fashion, the best clothing stores in New York. New York is, was, and always will be a shopping town. These are the stores that keep it vibrant and alive. And now for your favorite clothing stores, where do you love to shop? The Times asked, and readers came through, offering hundreds of thoughtful responses. Here are 25 of your choices. Stephen Karutz reports that when the New York Times published its list of the 50 best clothing stores in America, they knew they couldn't include every deserving business. So they asked readers to submit their favorites and tell us why they loved them. They received more than 500 responses, many thoughtful, heartfelt, and passionate. A team of reporters vetted them before ultimately selecting 25 stores. These shops share the same DNA as the Times' own favorites: extraordinary customer service, a commitment to the in-person experience, and that special retail magic that inspires and transports shoppers. From a vintage denim archive in Brooklyn to a bespoke shirt maker on the Lower East Side to a concept store in Queens that doubles as a community space, the list reflects the city's diversity. It's a love letter to physical retail in an age of algorithms. In obituaries, we remember 3 remarkable lives. Mildred Pitts Walter, author of books for black children, dies at 103. Richard Sandomir writes that teaching kindergarten in South Central Los Angeles in the 1950s and 60s, she realized that her students were not represented in the books they read. So she wrote her own. Mildred Pitts Walter, a Los Angeles schoolteacher who grew up in the Jim Crow South and wrote award-winning children's books focusing on black characters, filling a void in her students' reading material, died on May 19 in Redwood City, California. She was 103. As a kindergarten teacher in the 1950s and 60s in South Central Los Angeles, where most of her students were, like her, black, Ms. Walter searched for books that had black characters with whom they could identify. The rare one, she recalled, was usually stereotypical. So she began writing stories about black children doing ordinary things, losing teeth, learning to ride bikes, navigating sibling rivalry. Her first book, Lily of the Valley, was published in 1969. She went on to write more than 20, winning the Coretta Scott King Award and the Laura Ingalls Wilder Medal. She never stopped teaching, even after she became a published author. I wrote for the children in my classroom, she said. And for the child I had been. Her work helped build the foundation of contemporary black children's literature. She lived to see the world she wrote for begin to exist. John Ali, Nation of Islam official who clashed with Malcolm X, dies at 98. Clay Rizin reports that he was widely suspected of being an FBI informant and of playing a role in the 1965 assassination of Malcolm, the charismatic black activist. John Ali, a top official in the Nation of Islam in the 1960s who oversaw the religious group's tumultuous split with one of its most famous members, Malcolm X, and who was later accused of being an FBI informant and of playing a role in Malcolm's assassination in 1965, died on Sunday at his home in Philadelphia. He was 98. The assassination of Malcolm, at the Audubon Ballroom in New York, stunned a country still reeling from the murder of President John F. Kennedy just over a year earlier. Like the Kennedy assassination, it spawned decades of conspiracy theories. Ali, as National Secretary of the nation, was in a position to know or to facilitate. He denied involvement. The FBI's COINTELPRO program targeted the nation. The full truth may never be known. Ali lived long enough to become a footnote in a history he helped shape. And John Esposito, who challenged negative views of Muslims, dies at 86. Trip Gabriel writes that starting out in the 1970s as a rare American expert on political Islam, he became a prolific scholar and a prominent public intellectual. John L. Esposito, a leading scholar of political Islam whose career was shaped by two blows to American security, the Iranian Revolution of 1979 and the terror attacks of September 11, 2001, and who sought to counter a backlash against Muslims after each crisis, died on July 15 in Wynwood, Pennsylvania, near Philadelphia. He was 86. A practicing Catholic born in Brooklyn, Dr. Esposito was, in the 1990s, the founding director of the Center for Muslim-Christian Understanding at Georgetown University. He wrote more than 45 books, advised governments, and became the go-to voice for nuance when the public discourse turned reductive. He refused the binary, a colleague said. He made complexity accessible. His work helped a generation of policymakers, journalists, and citizens see Islam not as a monolith but as a diverse, contested, human tradition. He leaves a field he largely created. In the magazine, Larry Ellison bet it all on the AI boom. Will he be the face of the AI bubble? Inside the 81-year-old billionaire's risky, debt-fueled scramble to transform his data empire into an AI juggernaut. Jonathan Mahler, Jim Ruttenberg, and Kirsten Grind report that last September, Larry Ellison briefly became the richest person in the world after steering Oracle, the data and software storage company he founded, into the new world of AI. But Ellison's big bet on AI was built on an astronomical amount of debt, with implications far beyond the company. How did Ellison, at 81, go from being the star of the first formal news conference of the second Trump administration where the president announced the largest AI infrastructure project by far in history and said his friend Larry Ellison was just the man to get it done, to facing questions about whether Oracle's $80 billion in debt, much of it taken on to build data centers around the world, is sustainable? The investigation reveals a company that has mortgaged its future on a technology whose economics are still unproven. Ellison's personal fortune is tied to Oracle stock. The data centers require massive power, water, and capital. If the AI boom cools, if the models don't deliver the promised productivity gains, the debt could crush the company. And because Oracle is a linchpin of global enterprise software, the contagion risk is real. 5 takeaways from the Times investigation. 1. The debt is unprecedented even for a company of Oracle's size. 2. The data center build-out is speculative, many are being built without committed tenants. 3. Ellison's personal involvement is unusual for a CEO of his age and stature. 4. The Trump administration's embrace has political risk. 5. The implications go far beyond Oracle, the entire AI infrastructure boom is leveraged on similar assumptions. It's a portrait of a titan gambling his legacy on a wave he may not be able to ride. And a lighter note from the magazine, should you be able to tell Kevin Costner and Bill Paxton apart? A ruling on a movie night dispute. The column settles a domestic argument with rigorous filmography analysis. Costner, Dances with Wolves, The Bodyguard, Field of Dreams, Yellowstone. Paxton, Aliens, Twister, Titanic, Big Love. The verdict, yes, you should. They have different energies, Costner the stoic American myth, Paxton the anxious everyman. But the fact that the dispute exists at all says something about how our cultural memory compresses similar white male leads of a certain era. The column is a delight. Finally, opinion. On The Ezra Klein Show, Maggie Haberman discusses how Trump has changed. The New York Times correspondent says 70% of the president's mind is dedicated to White House renovations. In an edited transcript, Haberman tells Klein, many of the things that defined the first term, the chaos, the impulsivity, the staff turnover, are still there. But they're channeled differently. He's more disciplined about his message. He's more isolated. He spends hours reviewing fabric swatches for the East Room. He's obsessed with the physical plant of the presidency. The conversation ranges over Trump's relationship with his staff, his consumption of media, his fixation on loyalty, and his strategic calculation for the midterms. Haberman's book, Regime Change, co-authored with Jonathan Swan, is the basis. The episode is 58 minutes essential listening. Lydia Polgreen writes that the proximity to Trump is a stain at this point. Vivek Ramaswamy's brand of post-Trump fusionism faces a test in Ohio. Ramaswamy, the biotech entrepreneur turned presidential candidate turned kingmaker, is trying to build a movement that synthesizes Trump's populism with a techno-libertarian vision of governance. But his endorsement of a controversial Senate candidate in Ohio has exposed the limits of his influence. The piece explores whether the post-Trump lane exists at all or whether Trump simply consumes everyone who approaches him. A guest essay, all this staring at our faces is messing with our heads. Staring at ourselves on screens, on video, and on social media is taking us to a dark place. The author argues that the ubiquity of self-view, Zoom, FaceTime, TikTok, Instagram, the front-facing camera has created a new kind of self-consciousness that is corrosive to mental health. We monitor our own expressions in real time. We perform for an imagined audience. We lose the capacity for unself-conscious presence. The research is early but suggestive. Increased self-focus correlates with anxiety, depression, body dysmorphia. The essay calls for design changes, default cameras off, mirror mode opt-in, platforms that don't center the self. It's a provocative diagnosis of a condition we all live with. Another guest essay, Give FIFA's Boss the Boot. Soccer Federation should stop FIFA's boss, Gianni Infantino, from selling it out. Nathan Goldberg-Crenier, the vice president of U.S. Soccer, writes that soccer, and the joy the game brings to billions worldwide, isn't just a sport. It's a sacred public good. That makes FIFA, soccer's global governing body, a steward of the public's trust. Instead, Infantino plans to sell a stake in future World Cup revenues to private ownership. FIFA announced it intends to form a new entity called FIFA Forward Enterprise that would centralize its biggest events, including the World Cup and Club World Cup, and handle broadcast, sponsorship, licensing, ticketing, and hospitality. The move would privatize the crown jewels of the world's most popular sport. Goldberg-Crenier argues that federations must resist that the game belongs to the people, not investors. It's a rare institutional insider blowing the whistle. And a final guest essay, there are so many reasons to reject Todd Blanche. Here's another one. Ankush Kardori, a lawyer and legal analyst who worked at the Justice Department from 2016 to 2020, writes that Todd Blanche is a star, President Trump declared defiantly on social media as he sought to clear resistance from 2 Senate Republicans to his nominee for Attorney General. Instead of quickly acceding to the senator's modest requests for written guarantees confirming the elimination of a slush fund for January 6 rioters and the limiting of a tax immunity deal for Mr. Trump, the president raised withdrawing Mr. Blanche's nomination until next year, after they leave office, as a way to sidestep their opposition. The episode made the case against confirming Mr. Blanche even stronger, highlighting the chaos and incompetence that have, and the piece continues with a detailed legal argument about Blanche's fitness for the nation's top law enforcement job. That's your briefing for August 1, 2026. A day of borders and budgets, of heat and history, of markets and monuments, of stories that stretch from the foothills of the Wallowas to the halls of the Met, from the Passaic River to the Colorado Basin, from a 24-year-old's hedge fund to an 81-year-old's AI gamble, from a missing mother in Tucson to a writer's search in Helsinki. The world is wide, and the news is deep. We'll be back tomorrow with more. Until then, stay informed. This has been today's headlines from the New York Times.